why did Trump pull out?
He pulled out because Bibi doesn't want the JCPOA. Bibi wanted to go to war.
If you're in the media and you don't know the answer to this question, with all the tools that we have at our disposal to search and research something as simple as, when did Trump pull the United States unilaterally out of the JCPOA? Get another job. Because informing the public is not in your wheelhouse. Good job, Anna.
But why did Trump pull out?
He pulled out because Bibi doesn't want the JCPOA. Bibi wanted to go to war with Iran. He's wanted regime change in Iran for
So you're saying that Bibi Netanyahu controls Trump?
Trump's the most honest person in the world.
You're saying that Bibi Netanyahu controls Trump. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I think the Israeli government controls our government. Yes.
Well, that's your opinion.
No, it's not an opinion.
And you're wrong, but that's entitled to your opinion.
It's based on AIPAC.
So you're saying that Trump...
It's based on money and politics. It's based on the fact that Netanyahu goaded the U.S. to invade Iraq and then didn't even send IDF soldiers. He had 4,000 of our soldiers die in Iraq based on a false premise of weapons of mass destruction.
River, like you care about American soldiers.
I do care about American soldiers, and I care about American taxpayers who spend trillions of dollars on this trash when we are dealing with $37 trillion in debt.
So now you're a fiscal conservative.
Yeah, I am a fiscal conservative when it comes to spending our resources on wars that we shouldn't be fighting on behalf of a foreign country.
Let me understand this. You're saying that Trump is so weak and such a pussy that he just listens to whatever Bibi does? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think he's weak or a pussy. I think he's transactional.
I
think he's transactional. And I think that he buys this ridiculous narrative that Iran was behind the 2 assassination attempts when there isn't even a shred of evidence other than Netanyahu declaring.
Israel could not fight one day without the United States, and that's literally true, I'm sorry to say. Hezbollah and Hamas could not fight a day without Iran and other support. This costs money. This is big weapons. This is a political issue. This is not a terrorist issue. Netanyahu's absolute devastating mistake, which he writes about in 1996 in his book, Fighting Terrorism, it's the whole explanation of why he's so messed up in his head. He says, because we have Hamas and Hezbollah, and they are supported by Syria, by Iraq, by Iran, by Sudan, by Libya, we have to overthrow all the governments that support these. I'm not making this up. This is in print. Then he explains it to the U.S. Congress in 2000. He explains this. I know this because I study this for a living. He explains this to the American Congress. You overthrow Saddam, it'll be beautiful. Look what'll happen in Iran next door. The plan was 7 wars in 5 years. This is all well documented. The problem is not Hamas and Hezbollah. Why? Because if you make an agreement with Iran, if you make an agreement with the Arab countries, they will be disarmed and dismembered as part of the agreement. This is so obvious. This is an excuse. This is not a reality. This is an excuse of Netanyahu, who has been the biggest disaster in Israel's history by far.
Israel has never apologized for dragging the United States into countless wars in the Middle East, spending trillions of dollars running up U.S. debt, and doing what? Creating chaos. And it's interesting to go back and watch Netanyahu speak to the American people. There's a nice clip of him promising how wonderful the war in Iraq is going to be.
If you take out Saddam, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, he says 100% certain.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever.
Complete lies, by the way, and they knew that they were lies at the time.
They lied. Okay. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none.
The American people, they don't tell anybody, but you can watch step by step. We've had 6 of those 7 wars. The only one that hasn't happened is Iran. And if you watch every day now, the MSM, the mainstream media, is pushing for U.S. war with Iran. Netanyahu's pushing for war with Iran. They're really trying to get this started to make 7 out of 7. But Obama, for no particular reason, by the way, but he launched.
What is the Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA? Imagine a world where nations come together to discuss the future of nuclear weapons and the potential for peace. This scenario played out in 2015 when a significant agreement was reached involving Iran and 6 major world powers: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, and Germany. The agreement is formally known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. The primary goal of the JCPOA was to ensure that Iran's nuclear program would be exclusively peaceful. In exchange for Iran agreeing to limit its nuclear activities, the agreement offered relief from economic sanctions that had been imposed on the country. These sanctions had a substantial impact on Iran's economy, affecting its oil exports and access to international financial markets. Under the terms of the JCPOA, Iran committed to reducing its stockpile of enriched uranium, cutting the number of its centrifuges, and limiting the enrichment level of uranium. Additionally, the agreement established a framework for monitoring and verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency, ensuring compliance with the deal's provisions. The JCPOA was met with mixed reactions. Supporters argued that it was a significant step toward preventing nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, while critics expressed concerns that it did not address Iran's missile program or its regional activities. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement, leading to increased tensions and a series of events that have complicated the situation further. Since then, discussions have continued regarding the possibility of restoring the agreement or negotiating a new framework. The Iran nuclear deal remains a complex and evolving topic in international relations, with ongoing debates about its effectiveness and the future of nuclear non-proliferation efforts.
We had a diplomatic deal with Iran that was entered into in 2015 that was limiting their nuclear program peacefully, without having to bomb them, without having to kill civilians, without having to assassinate scientists. The United States, together with other nations, used the power of congressional sanctions, Congress did this well, to leverage an agreement whereby Iran agreed, and in the first sentence of the first paragraph of the first page of the agreement, Iran reaffirmed that it would, quote, never seek to purchase, acquire, or develop nuclear weapons. And in the body of that agreement, Iran agreed to a whole series of limitations upon nuclear research, nuclear activity, centrifuge construction, the percentage of enriched uranium it was allowed to have, and also Iran agreed to the most comprehensive inspection regime of any nation on the planet overseen by the International Atomic Energy Agency to ensure that they were meeting their requirements, that they would never seek to purchase, acquire, develop nuclear weapons, and that they would abide by the limits on centrifuges and the limits on enriched uranium and other activities. The agreement was working. Don't take it from Senator Kaine. The International Atomic Energy Association said the agreement was working. The allies and adversaries, Russia and China, were part of this deal, as were the UK and France and Germany. Those who worked on the deal said the agreement was working. It wasn't turning Iran from a bad actor to a good actor. It wasn't stopping all of Iran's bellicose behavior, but it was limiting the very nuclear program that is now trying to be bombed out of existence. We had an agreement that was working. President Trump became president in January of 2017, and he said, I don't like the agreement that President Obama did. I want to get out of it. President Trump's own cabinet, his Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, said, don't get out of this agreement. It's working. His Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, don't get out of this agreement, it's working. His National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, a former general, don't get out of this agreement, it's working. For God's sake, we have used diplomacy just as we are supposed to, by preferring peace and diplomacy first to deprive Iran of a path to a nuclear weapon. Shouldn't we prefer diplomacy rather than putting at risk the life of American troops, the 40,000 troops who are in the Middle East? So what happened to the diplomatic agreement? President Trump started to talk about abandoning it. I wrote a piece in Time magazine in 2017, and I said, if you abandon this agreement when it's working, what will Iran do? They'll go back to developing nuclear weapons. Because if the U.S. backs out of it, they will as well. If you abandon this agreement, North Korea will never do a nuclear deal with the United States, because why do a deal with the United States if the United States is going to abandon the deal even when it's working? President Trump didn't listen to me. He didn't listen to his Secretary of State. He didn't listen to his Secretary of Defense. He didn't listen to a lot of people in his administration. He tore the deal up. And Mr. President, what a tragedy. You have Israeli civilians who have been killed in the Iranian missile attacks, who have nothing to do with the military, and Iranian civilians who have been killed in missile attacks who have nothing to do with the military. They would be alive today. And 40,000 U.S. troops in the region would be safe today if we had decided to act in accord with our values and put diplomacy first and prefer peace over war. That's water under the bridge. But the question for this body that we will grapple with over the course of the next couple of weeks is whether the United States should be in another war in the Middle East. In particular, whether we should allow a war to start without us, whether we should hide in the tall grass rather than exercise our constitutional responsibility under Article 1. This is fundamentally a debate about Congress being true to its oath of office, and actually also being true to the obligations we have to our public. The framers put this in the Constitution so that we wouldn't be at war without a debate in front of the public. They had a view about the morality of war, and I think their view was basically this: there would be nothing more publicly immoral in the public space than to send troops into harm's way, risking death, if Congress was too chicken to have a debate and vote about whether the war was in the national interest. If we have that debate and we decide that war is in the national interest, then the troops go into war knowing that the civilian leadership of this country have had the hard debate in view of the American public and have decided that the stakes are sufficient to ask people to make the ultimate sacrifice. But how dare we, and I say this as a father of the United States Marine, how dare we ask people to make the ultimate sacrifice if we don't have the guts to have a debate and decide whether a war is in the interest of this country? I know what the American public thinks about this. There was a poll that was released today, and this is completely consistent with what I've heard from Virginians, and Virginia is one of the most pro-military states in this country. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. 1 out of every 8 Virginians is a veteran. That's not 1 out of every 8 adults. That's 1 out of every 8 Virginians is a veteran. And you add active duty, and you add the Guard, you add the Reserve, and you add the civilian DOD, and the military contractors and their families. We train all the Marine officers in the world. We have the biggest shipbuilding enterprise in the world. We have the Pentagon, the largest military office in the world. We've been the site of more battles on U.S. soil than any state in this country in Virginia. Revolutionary War, Civil War, the attack on 9/11 at the Pentagon. We are as pro-military state as there is, but I can tell you this: Virginians do not believe the United States should be in another war in the Middle East. Neither do Americans. A poll today suggests 16% of Americans think the U.S. military should get involved in a conflict between Israel and Iran. 16%. 60% say we should not. 24% are not sure. We need to have this debate in front of the American public. And let them watch us debate the stakes of this. And it might be that colleagues in this body or in the House think a war with Iran is a good idea. Let them put a war authorization on the table. Let's debate that. Let's debate that in front of Virginians and Kansans and Californians and hear what our constituents have to say. Let's debate that in the full view of people whose spouses are in the military or whose kids are in the military. Let's have that debate in front of them and hear what they think before we cast a vote that would be one of the most serious votes that you ever cast on the floor of a body like this. But we should not allow a war of the magnitude of this to begin with Congress hiding from the responsibility that was put on Congress's shoulders in 1787. I will be asking my colleagues to support my simple resolution as early as next week, no war without a vote of Congress. I will be asking my colleagues to support it and uphold the oath we've all taken to support the Constitution that established that most unusual principle, most unique principle that is part of what makes this nation special. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.